Good evening. I'm Mike Marza. Day one of deliberations in the Sean Diddy Combs trial now in the books. And there were some fascinating developments on this day one. The jury sending 4 different notes to the judge, a couple just procedural, but a couple also with some interesting, maybe backstory to them. The first indicated that they had selected a 4-person. That is part of the process. The second, very interesting, as the jury questioned one of the jurors' ability or willingness to follow the judge's instructions. We're going to get more into that in just a moment. And then the third note was about how to understand narcotics distribution and the allegations surrounding that, something that the judge and the jury will tackle first thing tomorrow morning. The fourth note was about wrapping for the day and returning tomorrow morning. The judge saying all along that the jury will be able to make their own schedule. They finished around 5 today. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. In just a moment, we're going to be joined by ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona to dig deeper into everything that unfolded in court and during the deliberations. But first up, Darla Miles with a recap from Lower Manhattan.
The first day of jury deliberations in the Sean Diddy Combs racketeering and sex trafficking trial off to an eventful start, even though it wasn't a full day. Combs' 3 adult sons and teen daughters in court today, as well as other relatives, and his 84-year-old mother, who has attended almost every day of the trial. Deliberations beginning at 11:19 after a 2-hour reading of jury instructions. All 12 jurors and 5 alternates with their eyes laser focused on the printout, seeing following back and forth on the page line by line. The 62-page document telling jurors to evaluate the evidence carefully and to resist jumping to any conclusions based on personal likes or dislikes, gut feelings or sympathies. The first note coming back quickly, which is not uncommon at all, saying, "We have elected juror number 5 as our 4-person. Then a second note after lunch saying, "We are concerned juror 25 cannot follow your honor's instructions. Can you please come out and speak with him?" The court sending a note back to the jury room, reminding them to follow his instructions to follow the law. The directive apparently helpful. After a few more hours of deliberations, the 4-person sending a third note about page 37 of jury instructions about drug distribution. That's one of the underlying crimes for the racketeering count, deciding if giving drugs to Cassie and Jane during freak-offs was a criminal act. And while jurors only need to find that Combs coerced the 2 women into participating just one time, they have to be unanimous on which one. Judge Arun Subramanian will address the jury's question about drug distribution when deliberations resume tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. He also told jurors to return with an open mind. In Lower Manhattan, Darla Miles, ABC7 Eyewitness News.
And our thanks to Darla for that recap. Joined now by ABC News legal contributor Bernardo Villalona to talk about this day one of deliberations. It feels like, it's been a marathon to get here. So here we are. I want to first off talk about this juror situation this morning. So the second note, and the 4-person said, something to the effect of, you got to come get this guy because he's not following what you want him to do. What do you make of the way it was worded, one, the way it was worded, and then 2, what do you think is going on in that jury room?
So at least because that juror, the 4-person, signed that note, doesn't necessarily mean that the 4-person was the person who wrote the note, is that they are jurors that are taking their oath seriously in terms of what are their directions, what are their instructions when it comes to deliberation. But I'm so surprised that so early on that you get a note like this, because usually when it comes to jury deliberations, it can become heated. Words can be exchanged. People start screaming. I've had jury deliberations where pretty much jurors have almost gone to blows doing deliberations, because you have to think that these jurors have been together for 7-8 weeks. They've heard from 34 witnesses. They heard hours and hours of closing arguments, and then this morning they heard over 2 hours and change of jury instructions. So there's so much to talk about, and people may be stuck also in their emotions and their feelings and have already dug their foot in the sand and say that, look, this is how I feel, and maybe I'm not going to move away from that. But we don't know. The note is still very vague. I'm curious to see whether they're saying that he doesn't have the ability to follow the instructions, or is it that he's choosing not to follow the instructions? So it's either he doesn't understand, doesn't comprehend, or he's saying that I'm not willing to follow these instructions no matter what you tell me to do. But it seems that they worked it out, because they were back deliberating for another few hours, and another note in regards to his actions didn't come from the a jury.
Yeah, that note about the juror came in about the 70th minute mark, so they were deliberating a little more than an hour before that note came in. So the second note of note, if you will, the second one that really meant anything today was this about narcotics distribution. What can we glean from that?
Yeah, so specifically, I think it says, if an individual asks for a controlled substance and the person hands it over, is it distribution? So a couple things that we can glean from that question. Number one, you don't get to the predicate acts to drug distribution unless you have already found that there's already racketeering conspiracy, that it's actually been proven. You don't get to the predicate acts. You don't start talking about the predicate acts unless you have decided, one, that there was an enterprise, and two, that there was an agreement. So I find it fascinating that they've already gotten there. But again, we don't know whether it's just one juror who has that question, or a few of the jurors that have that question, or actually all 12 of the jurors have that question. But also in terms of what predicate act that they're asking this question of, remember doing closing arguments, the prosecution said that if you find two independent drug distribution acts, then you can find him guilty of the racketeering conspiracy. So two independent times where Sean Combs distributed narcotics to someone, and it can be, you can ask me for drugs, I give you drugs, and that's possession with intent to distribute. It can be that easy, even by you asking me for it. It's that easy when it comes to making out that count. So it's so much that you can look into it. I would be nervous if I was the defense to see a question like that, because again, you must be that you have reached a decision as to that there was an enterprise, a criminal enterprise, an agreement to engage in predicate acts.
Yeah, and count one, racketeering conspiracy, faces up to life in
Up
prison.
to life. That's the most serious one.
It's a big deal. And then the other four deal with sex trafficking.
With this.
So take me through the process, because this is day one, and I'm interested to know, and I think a lot of people maybe watching this too would be interested to know, what happens when the jury goes into that room for the first time, the door shuts behind them, and for the first time in weeks, they are able to talk about this case?
Absolutely. So you got to think, once the jury starts deliberating, and these are the 12 sitting jurors, because the alternate jurors are no longer with this jury. So you have the 12 sitting jurors that are inside of a room, and while they're inside of that room, they don't have access to internet. They don't have access to their phones. Their only communication to the outside world is by sending a note through the four-person. They have pages that are numbered. They write out their note, whatever it's a question, it's an instruction, or saying that they want to leave by 5. The four-person signs it, dates it, times it, and then they knock on the door and they give it to whoever the courtroom deputy is, or the courtroom marshal that's standing by the door to take whatever notes that exist. So when they're inside that room, the 12 deliberating jurors, the first thing that they do is that they select who the four-person is. And that's exactly what happened. That was the first note that the court received today, announcing that there is a four-person, and juror number 5 is a four-person. Now, we don't know whether it's actually the sitting juror number 5 or whether it's a juror who had the number 5 when they were originally selected. So we're unsure as to who exactly the four-person is. The four-person doesn't have any more power or decision-making than any other person. The only thing is that the four-person, one, announces the verdict if there's a verdict, and 2, signs whatever notes that are sent out for the judge. But once we move on from there, the jury right now, they have access to a laptop that has the evidence on it. They also have the written jury instructions. So that's another thing that's like ringing a little bell in my head, because you have the jury instructions. So for them to have asked about the possession with intent to distribute, they want more clarification. So with the jury instruction, the evidence, and I believe they may have some transcripts or some testimony. I'm not sure if they have all of the testimony with them. They get to talking. 12 strangers that do not know each other now get to discuss finally the evidence that they've heard. They get to talk about Jane and Cassie and these videos and what they think about the case and what evidence they found credible. Was there an arson? Hey, Kid Cudi, you saw him testify, famous singer, rapper. You saw him testify. What do you think about what he testified to? Capricorn Clark, what do you think about what she testified? Oh, 2 entertainers also testified in this case. What do you think about that? that. I think also you get these jurors that remember throughout the whole trial, they were also taking notes because each one of them were given a notebook and they were taking notes throughout the trial. But the judge in his instructions specifically say that their notes don't carry more weight than what the transcript actually says. So the transcript is what's binding, not any juror's particular notes.
How often do they kind of take a straw poll and say, where is everybody at?
They probably already did. I think that's probably where they got to that one juror that had an issue or has an issue with deliberating.
So they basically go through the 5 counts.
It's quite possible.
Count 1, what does everybody think? Vote, and then assume, obviously they haven't reached a verdict yet, so there was some disagreement. So then when they operate, so tomorrow morning they'll come back at 9 a.m., get some clarification on, both sides are still trying to figure out what to even say to them,
what
right?
to say to them. So the prosecution wants this judge to tell the jury that what was on the mind of the person that received the narcotics shouldn't play any role as to the possession with intent to distribute. So whether someone asked for it or didn't ask for it, it doesn't affect the elements of possession with intent to distribute.
And the defense is still trying to work through what they want.
Trying to figure it out, yes. But also, by them asking that question, the defense can also glean, oh, they're taking into account whether Jane or Cassie actually wanted it, because remember, when we're asking about whether a person wanted it, we're going into the sex trafficking and about whether this sex was consensual. So you probably do have one juror that's taken that into account as to the consent of both these women.
It's so tough to know how long these
It is.
go,
It
right?
is.
But do you have any gut feeling on where we're at with the process?
A case like this is difficult. And the reason that it's much more difficult than another RICO case is because of the defendant. And you're dealing with a celebrity who once had the key to New York City.
Literally.
Literally known throughout the world. So I think that plays a huge role. It's almost like putting extra weight on the prosecution that, no, it's beyond all doubt you have to prove it. And of course, that's not the standard. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah. So much plays into it, because also you got to think that because this is Sean Diddy Combs, people on the jury can be like, no, this is not what he should go down for. It should have been state charges. He shouldn't have been charged with racketeering charges. That, oh, the government is targeting him. They should focus on other crimes, not this. This is something that's petty. You just never know what's on the mind of these jurors.
Yeah, because part of the jury instruction, the judge told them, you are the ultimate trier of the facts.
That's right. The most important people in that courtroom right now, Mike, are those 12 jurors. It's not the judge, it's not the government, it's not the defense attorneys. It's those 12 jurors. Those 12 jurors are ultimately going to decide the fate of Sean Diddy Combs.
And you got the sense of the weight of it all when we heard earlier that Sean Combs and his family appeared to be praying together and bowing their heads as the jury set out on this very important decision. And they're back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We appreciate your perspective as always, and we'll see what the notes that follow will bring and try to figure out when we're going to get a decision on this important case.
We'll be on standby waiting for that verdict.
Yes, we will. Bernarda, thank you. Jury deliberations, again, continue tomorrow morning at 9. That is day 2. So stay with Eyewitness News and ABC7NY for any new notes and updates. And as soon as a verdict is reached, we will have live coverage on Channel 7 and at ABC7NY. Bernarda, thanks.